Right, hello everyone. Welcome to our Informed Choices follow-up webinar. We had a huge amount of interest from our previous session, and this is a chance to have a more informal, slightly smaller session where we have an opportunity to ask questions. So please do, you are at the moment on mute and without your cameras on, but the Q&A is live and we'll be monitoring that as we go. So please do add your questions to the Q&A and we'll address those later. What we've done is, after the Informed Choices original workshop, we've now collated the Q&A that appeared in the chat, and we're having a session with these lovely people who I will go around and ask you to introduce yourselves, if that's okay, quickly, and just say why you're here and what the support of the test is. Can I go to Phil first?
I'm here. I'm here because I've been for a long time. I come, I suppose, as board member of Design and Mental Health, with a focus on raising standards in the built environment of mental health in patient facilities, but also with my day job. I'm chief exec of a manufacturer in this space, and one of the challenges we always come up against is, I think, a fear sometimes of adopting innovation, because it's sometimes better the devil you know. And I think better clarification of independently certified performance would help overcome it. So that's why I'm here. I've been involved in the standard, both with Richard, with BRE, and the wider testing and innovation framework subcommittee that we have here at Design and Mental Health now for about 8 or 9 years. So I've seen most steps along the way.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Phil. I'm going to hand over to Sean and Laura from BRE to introduce themselves.
First, I'm Sean from BRE. I've been involved in essentially testing products to the guidance now for 4 years, 3-4 years, and starting to roll out that side of the scheme, and actually see the manufacturers come in, bring their products, have us do what we can to defeat them in a sense, and then report back to them and give them information on how they're performing and help them learn as much as they can, really, about their products, and then use that beyond.
Hi, I'm Laura Crittian, certification manager at BRE. I've worked in the world of certification for 16 years now at BRE, so it's applying the knowledge I have on other schemes and bringing them to this scheme.
Thank you, Laura. And Richard, you were involved in the original writing of the standard. Can you say a bit about that?
Yeah, sure. So Phil and I sort of first met each other probably 8 or 9 years ago, probably at the beginning of this journey. And we got involved in a number of large consultancy, open fora with lots of people coming to BRE to share their experiences. And from out of that, we wrote a document. Primarily, I suppose, most of it was done myself, because at that stage I was transferring from being full-time employee to part-time employee. And during that part-time employee, this became my #1 project that I was working on for a number of years. And I have actually fully retired now, but the writing process of the document took a couple of 2 or 3 years actually to get through and get through the consultation processes. So hopefully, if there's any questions on how we developed the standard and where we got to now, hopefully I might be able to answer some of those questions, having been involved in it for such a long time.
Fantastic. Thank you, Richard. And finally, Kath, you've been supporting the standard for quite a long time. Why are you so I hate this word, but why are you so passionate about it?
Committed, I think, is the word.
Committed, yeah.
I think because, like Phil, I've got 2 hats. So as well as being vice chair of the the network. As an architect, I've been working in design and mental health facilities for probably about 20 years. Seen a lot of change through that time, but we still have the same problems in terms of having to continually retest products, and it takes an awful lot of time. And you don't always get the product that you thought you were getting when it turns up on site and gets installed, because of, you know, whatever reason, whether somebody's made a change to the product and hasn't declared it, or the installation quality just isn't as it should be, and it creates problems. It creates defects. It creates upset on wards when you know, products need to be repaired, removed, and we continually get that feedback. So being part of this process to try and get something that at least before we start making those decisions helps those informed decisions to be made, so that we all save time, effort, angst, and help improve facilities along the way.
Fantastic, thank you. I think like the desire for improvement and progress is something that unites everyone around this table. So and hopefully everyone who's come today. So so we'll, as I said, we'll be monitoring the Q&A, and do put your questions in there as we go. But we're just going to start with a roundup of the questions that appeared at our last session, and a key question that appeared in the chat was, how does the testing work? Who pays for it? How do they see return on investment? And so on. So I'm going to turn to Sean in particular and ask about how the testing works.
Yeah, I mean, this is a question which I could probably speak for hours on, but I'll try and keep it brief. Essentially, the manufacturers, after conversation with us, will submit their product, and for the ligature side of things, which I think is probably the sort of the more novel, new part of what we're doing here, we go through, so that we follow the test guide and go through with a list of different items, trying to find ligatures in all sorts of different locations on the product. So essentially, the more details there are on a product, the more places we will have to try and attempt to find things on there. And then as we progress through those list of items, if we do find somewhere where we can form a ligature, then we will use a handheld force gauge to gradually apply a load and then capture at which point either that particular ligature falls away because the product's rejected it, or because it's just slipped off a shallow surface, or perhaps we've taken it all the way up to 20 kilograms, which is sort of where we stop the test. And yeah, that's sort of the process for ligature testing. Then the impacts we at a known impact energy, so that's a known amount of mass of an impactor and a height to drop it from or swing it through. We test a number of locations on that product, depending on what the product is, and what details there are on there, to see what outcomes there are, if there's any resulting sort of issues, which could prevent a problem in the mental health environment, essentially.
So it's quite a systematic process, which is actually mapped out in the reprint of, we've got Informed Choices, a brief guide. This is the specifiers guide, but there is a reprint of this which will be available at the conference, called a brief guide, and that goes through, and it has a flow diagram that goes through the test and the different processes. So when you come to conference, do pick one of those up, and it will also be available on the website. Phil, I mean, it's the manufacturers who pay for it, isn't it? So how do they see return on investment?
So I think before I answer that straight away to the perhaps return on investment, I think it's worth acknowledging that we take a different approach to mental health, or we allow a different approach to mental health. So when I sell my product to, for example, a school building, I have to go through a whole range of tests to make sure that my product is compliant and at the appropriate standard for that environment. And that would be fire compliance for the door, it would be smoke compliance, it would be acoustic ratings. And you can look at almost every product in construction, and the manufacturer has to do this. And yet, in mental health, we somehow allow the client, the NHS, to say, "Oh, don't worry, manufacturer, we'll do that on your behalf." And you're simply passing the burden to the NHS. And I think there's a great inefficiency with that, because it means that almost every client is repeating the same testing. So first of all, to come back to the kind of question of who pays for this, then I think there's no other answer than the manufacturer, because they are the person who are ultimately selling and commercially gaining from sales of their products. I think, how do they get a return on investment? I would hope that actually it creates a test once and use that evidence many, many times. And that actually inherently introduces efficiency, not just for the NHS organisations or for any other private provider organisations out there, but actually delivers more efficiency for the manufacturer themselves. Because you do it once and use many, many times. And I think probably the third aspect is what I hinted at earlier on, is I believe that when clients are able to look at various different products and actually understand the performance with much greater confidence, I think that's what independent and thorough testing enables and empowers. I think the ability for health systems, NHS or others, to be able to adopt new products, adopt new suppliers, and actually innovate in a kind of more confident way, I think that's going to be great for those organisations who are continually pushing forward. So I think that's probably the biggest appeal from an organisation like myself, where we're always trying to push the boundaries. It's like, let's do it in a way and enable more people to adopt safer products, easier to use products, more therapeutic products, and keep it focused in that way.
And that's a good point about the learning for innovation for manufacturers that comes out of the testing process as well. It's not just what you're testing now. It's kind of you're future proofing in so many ways. Yeah.
And if I can segue to Richard, actually, maybe, because I remember you, Richard, you told a story about how testing fueled innovation, given the example of baby seats as well. So I don't know if it's whether you can share that little anecdote with the audience here about how testing frameworks can actually fuel more innovation.
Yeah, sure. That was actually, I'd almost forgotten about that. But yes, right in the early days, I was very much involved in the testing and approval of baby seats, particularly for cars and things. So I was involved in a lot of research that went on there. And nowadays, I think most people who've got a child will probably have heard of ISOFIX, which is a fitting of how a baby seat is fitted into a car. But 10 years or more ago, basically all baby seats were held in the car by seat belts, and that's how they were used. And they relied on how much strength mum had in strengthening, putting the seat belt on, and a whole range of different things like this. Somebody came up with the idea of ISOFIX. Immediately, all the car manufacturers said, "Oh, well, we can't fit this in our car because of this, and we can't do this, and our back seats are different from your back seats, and everything like this." And there was a whole great big argument about from the automotive industry. But anyway, there was enough momentum behind it, thankfully, and so that they were forced into it. And one massive car manufacturer who sells cars all around the world said they had 30 different seat designs in their cars. And when they started thinking about it and actually thought, well, actually, why do we need all these fancy iterations? And in the end, they reduced it down to, I think, to 7 different designs. And so therefore, actually, they got the ISOFIX fitted into their cars, they got consistency, and they saved a whole hunk of money because they'd actually rationalize their design process, and it made such a huge difference. And from that moment onwards, all the arguments went away, and we ended up with a consistent way of attaching a child seat to a car, which was far safer, relied much less on mum or dad trying to put the seat in the wrong way, and ended up with far better results. And it was just through that process of standardization.
That's a really good point about the kind of the life cycle of innovation within the marketplace and how it comes in. We're at the very beginning of informed choices. We're at the beginning of kind of establishing this in the marketplace. I mean, the development of the standard has been long established, but now we're in the new phase of uptake, and actually that kind of creates a bit of a ripple effect. And this next question, which came up in the FAQs, is an example of the kind of question that you have very early on in the life cycle when it's starting to be established. And people were asking, how do we have confidence in the test? So what happens if it doesn't uncover a particular ligature point or an area of weakness? And I think this is a question that I'm going to put to you first, Richard, and also to Laura.
So as we said right at the beginning, Phil and I were involved in this years ago, and I must admit I was fairly ignorant of the problems in the mental health industry, and learned a huge amount from 4 huge workshops which we had, where we had, say, 50-60 people from all across the industry coming and telling us about how accidents happen, how things worked, and all that. But the thing that struck me, having been in standards and testing for over 30 years, was that the way that the products were tested to try and overcome some of the problems that they see in mental health was so inconsistent, and it relied a lot on people, and in some instances it was relying on people doing a test where it probably mattered whether they had their Weetabix in the morning or not, because how strong they would hit something, or how they would do the test. And having been in that industry, in this testing and standards industry, it's so important to get consistency and reproducibility. And so that was one of the things which we tried really hard to do. And in writing the Informed Choices document, I trawled through for months and months and months of all the different world standards there were in terms of things which can happen in mental health, and trying to see if there is a standardized way of measuring and protecting against that performance factor, whether it's an impact, whether it's a fatigue test or whatever. All those things, brought all those things together and tried to take the best of all of those things together to put them into the Informed Choices document. And so that helped, hopefully, to one way is to get that consistency. And the other is that by having a single provider of the testing, you get that consistency of where some things do rely on humans. For instance, if you're trying to look for a ligature point, then that is relying on humans. But if you can put that into one knowledge point, and who are seeing lots of different products, lots of different scenarios, they can build up that database, and then they can apply that, and again, in a consistent way. And so that's what we've tried to do here, is to get consistency, and that helps manufacturers, because when they say that their product performs to a particular level, they can be very confident that actually Phil's company or anybody else's company are being tested against exactly the same criteria. There's no discrimination or anything like that. Everybody's being tested against the same criteria. And so hopefully that helps to engender confidence in the industry, and also for the people who are trying to specify products, they've got confidence that if they choose one manufacturer's product over another manufacturer, it's based on the evidence they've been given from against a standardized way of doing a test. And so
I want to hand on to Laura as well and find out. So when the test has been written to make sure that we've got consistency, but how do we make sure that we, as it's applied, that it's responding to issues that it comes across?
Yeah, I mean, to add to what Richard said, I mean, like Sean said at the beginning, the way we approach testing is very systematic. So there's that consistency of what we're doing, how we're doing it. Having worked in certification for 16 years, what I've learned is I don't have any opinions on judgments. We are completely impartial in what we do. So every client that comes to us, we approach in the same way, with that systematic way. It's consistent in what we do for everybody. This scheme, there's no pass or fail. it's a test and declare scheme. So we're not looking to find fault with somebody when they apply to us. That's not how we set out. We follow the standard, we do the testing, and what occurs during testing is what occurs, and that's what we report. It'll be in the reports, and then it will be leading through into the certification. So we are incredibly impartial in what we do. We're monitored in what we do. We approach everybody the same way, and the results are the results. And what we're hoping from this is that actually it helps to improve the products that are out there. And we've said from day one that this standard will be a live standard. It's not a standard that's written and it's left for 20 years and we come back to it. We're all learning all the time. There'll be various versions and iterations. As we all learn things, we can improve together.
Fantastic. And also the learning that we do, I just want to put a call out to anyone from the NHS who's interested in making sure that we continue that learning. So we're developing a working group of NHS people where we can have an annual review, and this is something that we're going to continue to co-produce. So there will be an annual review of this test, and we will be sending out invitations to people. But just so that you're aware, if you are from the NHS and you're interested in making sure that we can continue to have confidence in the test, then we want to work with you, alongside you on this. Kath, I want to bring you in because I know you were interested in talking about things that are uncovered and particularly about nurses and clinical teams working alongside estates teams with the test. So can I bring you in on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the concerns, or in the questions, is what happens if a ligature point is found that hasn't been found in testing, and ultimately, yeah, it might, but we learn from that, and it's no different from any other product recall in a way. That learning has to be advertised. It needs to go back to the product manufacturer. It needs to go back to the BRE. And the product needs to be reviewed, improved, and the testing needs to be reviewed and grown to include the problem that was found. And not every product or not every nook and cranny of a building is going to be tested. So there'll be, whether it's a partition, in the plasterboard, it doesn't stop necessarily somebody just eking away with a little small tool to form a ligature point. So it doesn't take away from the relational safety and the risk assessment that still needs to continue. It's not all risk is removed by testing products. There's still very much a nursing element and a relational safety that feeds back into the estates. So we know that risk assessments are carried out of environments. They're probably done, I don't know how often they're done, weekly, daily, in some cases, depending on the risk of the patient group. But that all needs to be fed back into it. So if something is found that is alive, as Laura said, it's very much alive testing criteria. So it needs to just keep going, and I think, and it's not a one solution fixes everything. It all needs to work together as a collective.
Yeah, it's not a pass or fail. It's not this is a no risk product. This is a risk.
Well, and a no risk product
has risk attached. There is no such thing as a no risk product.
Well, and there's no such thing as a no risk environment. By the time you bring everything together into a room, into a ward, into a whole hospital building, there is no such thing as zero risk. And I think that's got to be understood by designers and by estates teams and the clinical teams. And we've all got to kind of watch each other's backs, and report to each other and keep working as a team, so that we do, continue to make patients' lives better on wards, so that it helps their recovery, but keeps people safe and learn as we keep going. It's not, I suppose I'll just keep repeating myself, but the fact that it's not a single solution for every risk.
Absolutely. And I think there is, my understanding is there's good learning that comes out of this test that is also, it's useful for, so if you have a product that's tested, you have useful information for the clinical team, because you then know information like staff rotas or relational safety that you need to put around things. You have useful information for health and for the estates teams, because you have information about the product and its installation. And you also have useful information from the maintenance teams when it comes to what they should be looking out for, you know, as the product ages and so on, and as they need to, like, things that they need to be making sure that they're on top of. So there's layers of information that comes out from the tests, which will be really useful and help people document their estate.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think, Kath, you're best placed to answer this next question, which is, who else is supporting the test and where is it referenced?
Well, you're best placed to know where it's a reference, because I haven't done my reading. But in terms, and I apologise. There's a lot of people supporting. Trusts, if I speak to every single trust that I come into contact with, everybody thinks it's a brilliant idea. And architects and designers generally are signed up. The biggest 4 or 5 architects are all committed to supporting the testing regime and getting it rolled out. So we personally, you know, we talk to our clients, we say that we've signed the pledge. Some of our clients have signed the pledge. We'll talk to others about doing that. And so that we'd have to take back that, you know, what comes with that. And it's now referenced in the new HBN 0301, which has only been updated. I think everybody's got to be clear. It's only been, the supplement has only been updated for low secure and medium secure environments for adults and for CAMs. But it's I think the overarching 0301, which I suppose is the initial Bible, is due for updating as well. It's well out of date, so that will be picked up. And it's picked up in CQC recommendations as well, in terms of risk assessments. I don't know where else it's referenced. I'm sure you do, and I'm sure Phil does as well.
I'm aware of.
Yeah,
Yeah. Those are the two that I'm aware
there's
of.
a lot of support. It just needs to gather momentum. You know, some of the big name, you know, the tier 1 contractors who do a lot of the work are all signed up. About reminding each other that we are signed up, and pushing our clients and pushing the interest to say this will help. And the more momentum, you know, for me, it's, why wouldn't you want to get tested? Why wouldn't you want an easy handover? This is how our product performs, and to be some of the first in the categories that of the products actually wave the flag. You know, it's a fantastic marketing tool to be right at the forefront of specification. So why wouldn't you want to get tested? If you're behind the curve, you've just got to catch up. So I think from a manufacturer's perspective, you know, it's a no-brainer, really.
Absolutely. And in terms of, I'll just explain the sign-up process. So we're asking specifiers and NHS trusts and boards to sign a pledge to require manufacturers to produce evidence that their product has been tested before they supply to the NHS trust or to the specifier. And the pledge is so we're asking people to sign what we're calling a pledge, and the pledge is to say that we pledge to ask our manufacturers for evidence of testing, and that we pledge to make this mandatory by 2027, 28. So that's what we're asking people to sign up for. And we've got a number of trusts who have signed up. We've got individual presentations that we're doing to trusts. We've got who are interested in signing up. We've got training packages that we can do for newly signed up trusts, so that they are aware of the information that they need to trickle down across the estates teams and so on. So if anyone would like to reach out, I'll put my details in the chat, and please do reach out So let me just create a post. While I do that, can I ask, who am I going to ask about this? I think this is a question to everyone, but I'm going to ask it to Sean first. How will this get off the ground, and why should we get behind it?
Well, that is the $1 million question, isn't it? It is going to involve everyone, really. It's us delivering our side of the bargain. It's manufacturers coming to us with their products and asking for testing. And then it's the influence on the other side. It's the architects, the NHS, pushing both of us to get on with it.
Yeah, thank you. It's very true. Philip.
I'm gonna reference the food chain, and it's quite a basic principle. There's many people involved in this overall initiative and getting it adopted. If you went right to the top of the food chain, actually, it would be written into the building regulations, and that would be required once and done, and it would just become a requirement. That would be the very top of the food chain. That's possibly a big ask right now. So I then take the next step back, and you can see perhaps the 4 countries headline organisations, so NHS England, NHS Scotland, etc. You could see that maybe they're the people that make it a requirement, and that's perhaps not traditionally how these systems work. We've got a big step forward with the CQC referring to it, and the same with NHS England referring to it within the guidance. And I think that's sometimes as strong as they would ever go, because they are separate organisations to the NHS trusts themselves. So I then get to the next layer down on that food chain. And so I think the one organisation, and there's many of them, that has the ability to influence this more than anything or anyone else is the NHS trusts and health boards themselves. Because if they just simply say, from here on in, I've signed the pledge, I want all manufacturers going forward to provide that they've tested and evaluated the products independently and that they are certified, which number one means that I know exactly what the performance is, and I know they're reproducing this time and time again consistently, because that's what the certification element brings. And if all 80 NHS organisations and private providers across the UK tomorrow signed that pledge, as a manufacturer who's focused on this sector, you would have no choice but to test your product. And instantly the NHS would no longer have to be the person who carries the burden of testing, and dare I say, the kind of consequences of when perhaps sometimes those tests don't actually capture all the issues. So there's quite an easy, no cost solution to the NHS, which is, as you say, Hannah, sign the pledge, use your collective voice, group together, and basically say to manufacturers, we're going to start behaving like every other sector of construction. We're going to start demanding that you provide evidence to prove your performance and move beyond marketing claims. And not just that, testing. We want you to certify the certification scheme as well, which says you've tested it, yes, but you're also able to reproduce this consistently and reliably. And that's an ongoing audit process. And all of those things combined will remarkably improve the safety of patients, of staff, and actually help these organisations with the governance that they have when they're managing risks under the health and safety legal requirements. This is, at some levels, actually down to good risk management. So that's my pitch. So if anybody's listening that has access to the person who writes building regulations and would love to engage with us on what that could entail and what would be the benefit to patients and staff and everybody who works in these spaces, please connect us. Until then, the pledge is the action that we can all do tomorrow, and it will have a huge impact.
I'm going to pass to Laura because that's the call out to the NHS, and we also have manufacturers on the call. And I want to see, Laura, what's your call out to manufacturers who are on this call?
Come to us and commit. We've got a lot of questions from people. We have seen a huge increase actually in queries from manufacturers, interest coming in. Something we're offering here at the moment is kind of a lab day where you're not committing to the full testing, but people can bring their products in and explore how they would perform before going the full process. And then there's been a lot of interest in that. But yeah, we need manufacturers to start committing to the full process and going through at the moment. As Phil was saying, you know, you've got the testing side of things, but with the certification, the additional element it brings is the FPC. So for anyone that doesn't know all the acronyms, that's factory production control. So we go out and audit the manufacturing, because the key thing with this is that repeatability of the product is what's coming off the manufacturing line exactly the same every single time. And I think with a lot of manufacturers, it's going to be a learning curve, but I think we can actually genuinely help people improve.
Fantastic. And there is a lot of learning opportunities coming up. There's a info day coming up at BRE in September, which we're really excited about. We'll be pushing that out. If you're not signed up to the Design and Mental Health mailing list, then every single opportunity will go out on the Design and Mental Health mailing list. So please make sure you're signed up to that. This document, as I said, will be available at the conference. And there's also a workshop at the conference where we've got someone who was involved in the CQC, writing the CQC and Nursing Directorate guidance. David Wilmot from Signet is going to be talking, we're running a workshop about how you choose the right products for the right spaces and the right areas. So that will be David Wilmot in conjunction with myself and Sean and Laura from BRE. Will be talking about things about tiers and the different requirements of different products, and that's a workshop scenario. I think one thing that we can do as Design and Mental Health Network is we can help facilitate trusts and manufacturers to be able to have a cross industry conversation. So that's quite an exciting opportunity, being able to pull together so that trusts can compare best practice. So that's something that we'll be doing at the conference. And as I said, there's this follow-up info day. I've got a question in the chat from someone who's also called Hannah, but I don't have a company name here. In terms of inquiries from manufacturers, are you working through queries? I think they're particularly interested in following up their individual query. Laura, can I suggest that you put your email into the chat as well?
Yeah, it's not a problem.
Yeah. Great. And I've got someone who's going to email me. Fantastic. So we'll hold the space for another 3 or 4 minutes, just in case there are any further questions. Richard, do you have any last thoughts while we're just waiting for people to have an opportunity to write their questions in the chat?
No, other than just to reiterate really some of the things which we did in developing the document, in terms of trying to make sure that it represented not only consistency and reproducibility, but real life situations. So a lot of the data and a lot of the loads and things like this was taken from anthropomorphic data that we'd got from NASA and from the Health and Safety Agency and a whole range of other things, which is the maximum size of people, the smaller size of people. And then we used criteria like who's the fastest person on the earth, Usain Bolt, and used his energy that he could generate if he were to charge at a door or something like that. And with the mass of people, and it was just trying to get the documents that we wrote to represent real life situations, so that we weren't sort of over egging the forces, but they were forces that could genuinely be generated by humans. And so hopefully in that respect, the document has been tailored specifically to the mental health industry, and not to, as I made the mention before, that we trawled a lot of standards, but a lot of the standards just built on building regulations. We've tailored them to the mental health industry, which is, I think, is the main outcome which we wanted to get from the document, so that it is relevant to the industry.
I think I
Thank
can,
you.
if it's okay, Hannah, I can probably build on that as well, because I think one of the questions we often get, clinicians have an incredibly tough job. They're managing risk in many different dimensions, and it's quite incredible what they do. And they are experts in ligature, not just from a point of typical forms, typical tools, but the practices that occur and what they witness firsthand. But the big challenge with these things is when they've done tests, and some of the conversations we've had with them about the testing approach they get, is sometimes they might only get 30 minutes or 40 minutes to actually evaluate 2 or 3 different products. It might be in and amongst a busy workday, so maybe it's at lunchtime, and that means is there the full focus. So the ask of clinical staff to bring in their expertise and do testing is, it's not that they're not capable of doing more, it's just there's a reality to what their day job is as well. And so what we did during this process was, through all the workshops, and we did a number of road shows as well, both in London, Manchester, and across Scotland, was really kind of try and lean into their expertise and sponge it. And one of the benefits of having a national testing guidance is you get hundreds of people's experience and expertise. And I think that gives the benefit of not just fixing yesterday's issues, but also perhaps tomorrow's as well, because you start teasing together, like, what are the themes of behavior? What are the themes of tools that are used? What do people use as a ligature? What do people use for the anchor point, etc., etc.? And from that, what Richard did, which Richard, you're probably quite humble at times, but you spent a huge amount of time translating literally, tens and hundreds of incidents that had been shared with us, and thinking through, how can I make that into a systematic testing model? And so the way that we actually looked at that was we realized from various research studies online that ligature and a determination of a ligature attempt can actually translate into the weight that's applied. So is for example, the full body loaded, or is only portion of the body? And then the other thing we learned was what the ligature tool was, and the kind of the diameter of the ligature cord as well. That could also suggest how determined an effort this was. It's not typical, for example, that people would have guitar string that's 0.5 millimeter within their personal space. But that might be a really determined attempt if somebody is able to work to something like that. So when we looked at the kind of all the experience of ligature, we translated it into a systematic format of testing, which allows us to kind of really test and challenge products and their capabilities to the most extreme circumstances, but cover the general as well. And it's that kind of thoroughness. I know, Sean, when you did your very first test, I think rather than it being 30 or 40 minutes, I think you and a team spent about 7 or 10 days. It was a huge amount of time, because you were focused to follow through the full testing guidance document step by step by step to make sure no stone was unturned. And it's that kind of I think focus amongst the expertise that we've gained from all the clinical insights that we've learned that really give the richness to this standard.
And not forgetting as well, Kath's point, that relational safety is the first port of call, not physical safety. Actually, relational safety is the first port of call and should be the first backstop. people in distress, and just to kind of bring it to a close, just reflecting then on the fact of that these are really vulnerable people that we're dealing with. They're not ingenious, they're desperate, and it's important that as clinicians and as manufacturers and as people with a passion for this subject, that we remember that, and that we think of them as human beings who need relational safety first. Yeah. So I'm going to bring it to a close. Thank you very much, everyone. There are emails in the chat, so please do note those if you would like to, and there'll be a follow-up email where we'll share the email addresses again. So thank you very much, everyone, for joining us this afternoon. We really appreciate your time, and have a lovely day. The sun is shining, so enjoy your mental health. Go out and move for Mental Health Awareness Week in your lunch break, and enjoy the sunshine. Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.